Everyone feared the jungle at night. Even the bravest alien hunters never entered after sunset. They whispered stories about red eyes in the dark. Some said it was a ghost. Others believed it was a cursed beast. But no one had ever seen it up close and lived to tell the full tale. They only knew one thing: if you saw the red eyes, you were already too close. Mason had never believed in such things. He was a human technician, not a soldier or explorer. He had crashed his small shuttle weeks ago while traveling to a nearby colony. Now, he was alone on an alien planet, far from help, living inside a half-broken metal shelter he built from the wreck. He had little food left, a damaged unit, and no weapons. But the worst thing was the silence. The feeling of being watched. At first, Mason thought it was just paranoia. The jungle made strange sounds: clicks, rustles, distant roars. But soon, he started hearing footsteps outside at night. Heavy, slow steps, never running, always circling his shelter. He would sit still, holding a piece of metal like a knife, heart pounding. But nothing ever broken, nothing ever spoke. It just watched. Then the nightmares started. Mason dreamed of red eyes floating in the dark, staring through cracks in the walls. In his dreams, the creature never attacked. It just stood there, waiting, watching. When he woke up, the air would feel cold, like something had been inside with him. One night, something changed. He woke up just before dawn and opened the door quietly. On the ground, right in front of the shelter, was a pile of fruit. Bright, clean, untouched. It looked freshly picked. Mason stepped out slowly, looking around. There were no tracks, no broken branches, just the fruit. He stared at it, confused. Who left this? Why? The next night, he stayed up late. He didn't sleep. He didn't blink much either. Around midnight, he heard the sound again, the same heavy steps outside. This time, he didn't move. He kept the fire low and peeked through a small crack in the wall. And there it was. A tall, shadowy figure stood near the tree line. It was huge, at least 7 feet tall. Its eyes glowed red, just like the stories, but it wasn't attacking. It stood still, then bent down and gently placed something on the ground. Fruit. Again. Then it backed away and vanished into the trees. Mason didn't sleep that night. The next day, he tried to follow the creature's path, but the jungle was too thick. He almost got lost. He returned to his shelter, more confused than ever. Was this monster trying to feed him? Protect him? Or was it a trick before something worse? More nights passed. More fruit appeared. Once, there were roots he could use as medicine for his infection. Another time, a fresh water pouch made from some plant skin. It was as if someone or something was taking care of him. But why? The villagers from a nearby settlement had once warned Mason. That jungle holds a curse. The red-eyed monster shows no mercy. It drags victims into the trees, and only bones return. They feared the creature. They avoided even looking in the direction of his crash site. Yet Mason felt no fear now. He felt confusion, and something else. Curiosity, maybe even gratitude. He started leaving gifts back: a piece of cloth, a carved figure, a small light. The next night, the red-eyed figure appeared again. It stood there longer this time, looking at the gifts. Then, it turned and walked away, slower than before. It wasn't just watching anymore. It was learning. Still, Mason had no answers. He didn't know what the creature wanted. He didn't know if it would one day stop being kind. But deep in his heart, he started to believe that maybe the monster wasn't a monster at all. The jungle still whispered. The red eyes still glowed. But now, when Mason heard the footsteps at night, he didn't hide. He listened. The gift of fruit. The jungle never gave gifts. That's what the villagers always said. If something offers you food in the wild, it's a trap, they warned. But what Mason found outside his shelter every morning told a different story. He had started marking the days on the wall using sharp stones. It had been 18 days since the crash. His ribs still ached from the impact, and his left arm was healing slowly. The fruit kept coming, always clean, ripe, and placed carefully like an offering. No claw marks, no blood, no sign of a predator, just kindness in the shape of food. This morning, though, the gift was different. It wasn't just fruit. There were wrapped leaves filled with crushed herbs, smelling strong and bitter. Mason recognized one scent from a first aid manual. It was a plant used to treat infections. He blinked. How did it know? His leg wound, which had started turning purple, needed help. Without thinking much, he took the herbs, boiled them, and applied them to the injury. The pain was sharp at first, but the swelling eased by sunset. Mason sat quietly by the fire, his heart heavy with new questions. That night, he didn't just wait. He prepared. He placed a single, shiny metal tool useless to him now near the door, hoping the creature would see it as a gesture. Then, he stayed awake, hidden near the shadows, watching. The air went still around midnight. No breeze, no insects, just silence. Then, the branches moved slightly. The shape stepped forward, tall, broad, wrapped in animal skins and armored plates. The red eyes flickered softly in the darkness. It didn't speak. It didn't growl. Instead, it crouched and placed something on the ground. A pouch. Mason couldn't see what was inside from where he hid. But the moment it turned to leave, he stepped out just enough for the creature to notice him. They locked eyes. No one moved. Mason raised both hands slowly, showing he meant no harm. The creature tilted its head, as if curious. Then it looked down, saw the metal tool Mason had left, and gently picked it up. It made a low, soft sound, not quite a growl, but not threatening either. Then it disappeared back into the trees. The next morning, Mason opened the pouch. It held dried meat, clean, safe, and smoked. Someone or something had taken time to cook it. Mason sat for a long time with the food in his hand. He was no longer afraid. He was fascinated. Something intelligent was out there, watching him, feeding him, learning about him, and now responding. Later that day, he heard voices from afar. The villagers were nearby again, shouting in their own alien language. He couldn't understand every word, but one thing was clear: they were searching for something, or someone. He caught a phrase he had heard before: the cursed one, the jungle's red-eyed demon. Mason's chest tightened. They were looking for the creature, and they meant to kill it. That night, he didn't sleep. He stayed by the fire with a sharp stick beside him, not to protect himself, but to protect her, though he didn't know yet if it was a her. Somehow, the idea settled in his mind. Maybe it was the way the creature moved, or the careful way it prepared gifts. For the first time in his life, Mason didn't care if the rest of the galaxy thought he was mad. He had seen fear. He had seen cruelty. But the one being they called a monster, she had shown him more care than anyone ever had on this planet. He whispered to the dark, unsure if she was listening. "Thank you." Somewhere in the trees, two red eyes blinked softly. Broken wing, broken wall. Storm came without warning. No thunder, no flashing skies, just a heavy wall of rain that fell like stones. The winds roared and twisted through the jungle, bending trees and shaking roots. Inside the shelter, Mason struggled to keep the roof from flying off. He had patched it so many times, but now the structure groaned like it was alive and dying. A loud crack echoed through the night. One side of the shelter wall split open, the corner beam snapping under pressure. Mason was thrown backward, crashing against the floor. The rain poured in. Leaves and dirt flew across the room. He tried to push the broken wall up, but pain shot through his arm. It was the one still healing. His vision blurred. His breath slowed. Then everything went dark. When he opened his eyes, hours had passed. Morning light filtered through the cracks in the roof. His head throbbed. His body ached. He expected to see the jungle inside: mud, vines, maybe wild animals. But instead, the broken wall was gone. It wasn't gone, it had been replaced. New branches, thick and smooth, were tied tightly together with vines. Someone had rebuilt the wall. Stronger, cleaner. Mason sat up slowly, confused. Then he noticed the footprints. Large, deep, leading from the edge of the jungle to the shelter, and back out again. And next to them, drops of blood. The creature had come during the storm. Not to harm, not to watch, but to protect. And it had bled doing it. Mason stepped outside, heart pounding. The rain had washed most of the signs away, but the path was still clear. He followed it into the trees, each step careful, quiet. It didn't go far. Just beyond the clearing, Near a fallen tree, he saw her. She sat slouched against the trunk, her side wrapped in a strip of cloth. His cloth. She had taken it from the shelter and used it to bind a wound. Her red eyes were half closed. Her breathing was slow. For the first time, Mason saw her clearly. She was tall, yes, and armored, but not like a beast, more like a soldier. Her armor was made of old bones and bark, strong but worn. Her skin was dark, not just in color but in tone, like it had seen too many suns. She was not young. She was tired. And now, she was hurt. Mason took a slow step forward. She opened her eyes. They met his, but she didn't move. No growl, no threat. He knelt beside her, pulled a clean strip from his shirt, and gently helped tighten her bandage. She winced but didn't stop him. When it was done, she turned her head slightly. Not a thank you, but not rejection either. Mason didn't say a word. He sat next to her as the jungle sang its strange morning song. Two souls, broken in different ways, resting in silence. Later, he helped her to her feet. She didn't speak, but she didn't resist. Slowly, they walked back to the shelter. Mason brought water. She drank carefully. He handed her some dried meat she had given him days ago. She didn't take it at first, but then she did. For a brief moment, they sat on opposite sides of the small fire inside the shelter, watching the flames, not as man and monster, but as survivors. That night, Mason didn't block the door. He left it open, and still, the jungle whispered. But this time, it whispered change. A touch of trusty fire crackled softly between them. For the first time, the red-eyed guardian didn't sit in the shadows. She sat across from Mason, the flickering light dancing over her strange armor and wounded side. Her movements were quiet but not nervous, her breathing calm but alert. The space between them was no longer filled with fear, but with something unspoken. Mason placed a warm drink in front of her, water mixed with a bit of boiled root for energy. She didn't touch it at first, just stared at it. Then, with slow, careful fingers, she lifted the cup and drank. No words, just a quiet sip and a gentle nod. It was the closest thing to a thank you he had seen from her. She didn't speak his language. He didn't speak hers. But Mason started using gestures. He pointed to himself. Mason then placed a hand on his chest. She watched closely, then slowly raised her own hand to her chest. Her voice was low, rough, but she said something short, soft. A name? Maybe. He couldn't repeat it exactly, but he tried. She didn't laugh. Instead, her eyes narrowed. Approvingly, they continued, like that for days, exchanging small words, simple signs, sharing food. She brought wild vegetables. He showed her how to roast them. She showed him how to bind wood without rope. He showed her how to sharpen metal edges. Neither spoke fully, but both were learning. One night, as the fire burned low, Mason pulled out a small music device. It was old, half broken, but it still worked. He played a slow, soft melody, something from Earth, something quiet. She tilted her head, curious. Her red eyes glowed not with danger, but wonder. Then something unexpected happened. She closed her eyes. She listened. For a few moments, they didn't feel like alien and human. They felt like two people in the same storm, sheltering together under the same roof. The silence between songs felt full, not empty. But peace never lasts long in wild places. The next morning, they found signs, footprints, not hers, not his, but others, fresh, deep, heavy. The villagers had come close. She growled quietly, her body stiffening. She motioned for Mason to stay quiet. Her instincts took over. She vanished into the trees like a shadow, moving with speed no human could match. Mason waited all day, hiding inside the shelter, heart pounding. The jungle around him felt heavier now, as if it held its breath. That night she returned. Her armor was scratched, her hand was bleeding, but her face was calm. She dropped something in front of him, a piece of broken spear. From the village, Mason understood instantly. She had chased them off, alone, without hurting them too badly, just enough to warn, but that meant something had changed. She wasn't just feeding him, or protecting him, she had chosen him. Mason stared at the broken weapon, then looked at her. And he knew trust had been born, not just between two beings, but between two worlds that had never meant to meet. In the deepest part of the jungle, where monsters once lived in stories, a new story was beginning. One of loyalty, one of quiet, wordless trust, and just beyond the trees, others were watching and planning the villagers' trap. They came at night, not with fire but with fear. Mason heard them before he saw them. Whispers, footsteps, the faint clicking of alien weapons being loaded. He peeked through the cracks in his shelter wall and saw them, villagers, cloaked in hunting gear, faces painted with ash and oil. Their eyes glowed with something worse than hatred, belief. The belief that they were doing the right thing. For generations, they had feared the red-eyed one, called it cursed, blamed it for their sickness, their poor crops, their lost hunters. No one had dared enter the jungle in years. Until now. Now, they wanted to kill what they didn't understand. Mason's hands shook. His body tensed. His shelter wasn't strong enough to protect anyone. And she wasn't here. Not yet. She had gone to scout the northern ridges earlier that day, trusting him to keep the shelter safe. But now the hunters were closing in with blades, nets, and poison darts. He could run. He could hide. But he didn't. Instead, Mason stepped outside slowly, carefully, arms raised. The villagers shouted in their language, surrounding him. They didn't hurt him, but they didn't smile either. One elder pointed a long spear at Mason's chest and shouted, "Step aside. The beast has bewitched you. We will end it." Mason shook his head. "She's not a monster," he said firmly. "She saved me." They didn't understand his words, but they understood his tone. And they didn't like it. Then the air shifted. Leaves rustled. A low, rumbling growl rolled through the trees. She was back. She stepped into the moonlight, wounded arm bandaged, armor still dirty, but her posture strong and unafraid. Red eyes burning not with rage, but warning. She placed herself between Mason and the villagers. The elder raised his spear. She didn't move. One of the younger hunters shouted and lunged forward. The trap was sprung. Chaos exploded. Nets flew. Spears cut through the air. Mason tried to scream, but his voice vanished in panic. He saw her leap fast, powerful, a blur of muscle and instinct. She knocked two hunters aside, but not with deadly force. She didn't strike to kill. She struck to stop. Then it happened. One dart, poisoned and sharp, pierced her side. She staggered. Another net wrapped around her leg. She roared, her body trembling. Mason snapped. He grabbed a burning stick from the fire and waved it wildly, yelling, charging into the circle. Flames and shouts lit the clearing. The hunters hesitated, confused. Why was the human defending her? In the confusion, she broke free, but barely. She collapsed to her knees. The poison was working fast. Mason ran to her side, wrapping his arms around her to keep her upright. "You're not alone," he whispered. "Not anymore." The elder stepped forward again, now with blade in hand, but then she looked up. Her face shifted. The bone mask she always wore cracked, and slowly she removed it. Gasps filled the night. Underneath was not a monster but a face. Tired, wounded, female, and beautiful in a wild, strange way. Her skin was marked by old scars. Her eyes, not just red now, but full of pain and mercy. The villagers froze. She didn't beg. She didn't cry. She simply stared at them, unafraid, even as she bled. Then, with what strength she had left, she spoke. Not in their language, not in Mason's, but a single word that meant peace. The elder lowered his blade. No one said anything for a long time. Mason held her tightly. The villagers stepped back, their expressions full of confusion. Not victory, but doubt. The trap had failed not because the hunters were weak, but because they had seen the truth. And sometimes, the truth is harder to face than any monster. The truth beneath the mask. No one moved for a long time. The red-eyed guardian lay still in Mason's arms, her breath shallow, her blood dark against the earth. The bone mask now rested beside her, cracked, broken and silent. For the first time, the villagers could see her face. Not a beast, not a demon, but someone who had suffered long before they ever feared her. The elder who once held the blade now stood frozen. His hands trembled, not with Fear but with uncertainty. Mason looked up at them all, anger and sorrow clashing in his chest. "She's not your enemy," he said, even though they didn't fully understand his words. "She saved me." Again and again, he pressed a damp cloth against her wound. Her eyes opened slightly. Their red glow was dimmer now, softer, but she was still awake, still here. One of the younger villagers stepped forward, confused. "Why does she protect him?" he asked the elder in their language. "Why would a monster bleed for a human?" The elder didn't answer, but Mason knew the answer, because she had once been like them, part of a tribe, a clan, maybe even a soldier. But something had happened, something that made her flee into the jungle, wounded and alone. And when everyone else saw curse, she still found it in her to protect, to help. Later that night, after the villagers left silent, unsure of what to believe, Mason sat beside her in the shelter. He lit a new fire and boiled water with the herbs she had once brought him. She couldn't speak much, but her eyes followed him. She was awake, listening. Then with effort she spoke. Not loud, not strong, but clear. "I was not always alone." Mason froze. She continued, her words slow as if shaping them hurt. "Long ago, I led warriors. I believed in the law. But when the law turned cruel, I disobeyed. I protected the weak. And for that, I was cast out." Her voice cracked, not from pain but from memory. "I hid. They feared me, called me cursed. I stopped speaking. I stopped hoping." She looked at him now, her voice barely above a whisper. "Until I saw you, lost, alone, and not afraid of the jungle." Mason swallowed hard. He didn't know what to say, so he simply placed his hand gently over hers. She flinched, then allowed it. "I thought you were the last monster in this jungle," he said quietly. "But maybe you're the last good soul left in it." A faint smile touched her lips. It didn't stay long, but it was real. She told him her name again, this time slower, and Mason repeated it correctly. The fire crackled between them. Rain tapped lightly on the roof. Outside, the jungle had grown silent, not from fear but from peace, as if even the trees were listening. In the morning, she stood, weaker but alive. She looked toward the village in the distance. "They will return," she said. "I know," Mason replied, "but this time, they won't find a monster." She looked at him with something strange in her eyes, something like trust, maybe even hope. Not every mask hides a monster. Sometimes it hides a soul waiting to be seen. They called her a monster once. They whispered her name like it was poison. But now, the whispers had changed. The villagers returned, but not with spears or traps. This time, they came with questions, with cautious steps, with eyes that dared to look past fear. Word had spread about the night of the unmasking, about the red-eyed warrior who bled for a human, but spared her enemies, about the exile who still protected those who rejected her. She stood beside Mason. When they arrived, no mask, no armor, just a deep scar on her side and eyes that no longer burned with anger but with truth. The village elder stepped forward, the same one who once tried to kill her. His head was low. He carried no weapon. He spoke slowly, his voice like dried leaves. "We were wrong." She said nothing, just listened. "We feared what we never tried to understand," the elder continued. "And you saved one of our kind when no one else would." She looked at Mason, then back at the villagers. "I saved someone who didn't scream." The elder nodded. "Will you come back?" She turned her gaze to the jungle behind them, the trees that had kept her hidden, the shadows that had become her home. Then she shook her head. "I am not the same as before. I do not belong where I once stood." Mason stepped closer. "But maybe you belong somewhere new." The villagers were silent. Then one of the children, a young alien girl with wide silver eyes, walked forward. She held out a flower, not to Mason, but to her. The warrior knelt slowly and accepted the flower with careful hands. The girl smiled. "You're not scary," she said. A quiet laugh escaped her lips, low, tired, but full of life. From that day on, the jungle was no longer a place of fear. The path to Mason's shelter was walked often. The fruit trees were shared. The poison roots were harvested together. And the one they had feared became something else entirely. They didn't call her monster anymore. They called her guardian. Mason rebuilt the shelter, stronger this time. With help, she lived nearby, but often stayed close watching. Not because she had to, but because she wanted to. Some said she still roamed the jungle at night, eyes glowing red, keeping away the real dangers, the wild beasts, the bandits, the storms. Others said she had fallen in love with the human who never ran. But Mason didn't care for stories. He only cared for the truth. And the truth was simple. A monster didn't bring fruit to a stranger's door. A monster didn't bleed to protect someone it barely knew. A monster didn't choose kindness again and again in a world that gave none. She was never a monster. They just never looked close enough to see her soul. Now they did, and they never looked away again.